This is Carter, and welcome to this episode of Making It Up, the conversation series where I get to sit down with writers and just explore their lives. As I've mentioned several times on the show, one of the reasons I started this show is because I got sick of being asked questions in my own interviews that were kind of stock questions, kind of the interviewer just had their list of questions and they weren't really reacting necessarily to what you were saying. So I wanted to create a show where it's totally unscripted. It's like I just met them at a cocktail party and I'm curious and I want to ask them questions. So I don't write anything down ahead of time. And of course, it's also called Making It Up because of the storytelling that we do at the end. And I will say there are times when I might have a pretty big name on the show and I think to myself, well, maybe maybe I should prepare for this. Maybe I should list some questions out, and I resist that instinct. And of course, I know who they are. I research them. I understand their body of work. I understand what book might just be coming out right now for them. But I really don't want to spend time pre-planning questions because I just kind of want to see where the conversation takes us. But before we get to today's guest, I will just mention that my company Unbound Writer is now taking registrations and there is early bird pricing for our October 2024 2.5-day immersive coaching and writing retreat in beautiful Boulder, Colorado. It's going to be amazing 2.5 days of instruction, writing, bonding, community, and growing confidence for aspiring or even established writers out there. So you can learn all about it at my website, unboundwriter.com. And while you're there, you can check out my one-on-one coaching services, as well as very soon we're going to be launching the first series of 3 online courses. So we're very excited for that. So today on the show, I had 2 guests. Usually I just have one, but I have 2 guests, and I had 2 guests on because they are co-authoring. Today on the show, I had Jeffery Deaver and Isabella Maldonado. So big names. So, again, you would think I should probably had questions prepared in advance. Again, I resisted that and just decided to wing it. Their new book is coming out. This is actually the first time co-authoring for both of them on a novel, at least. Their new book coming out is called Fatal Intrusion, and it's out on September 1st, and it looks amazing. And it's going to be the first in a series of books that they are co-authoring together. So normally in one of these shows, if you listen to them before, I go deep into a writer's background and their journey and how they got to where they are today. A little bit more difficult, obviously, to do that with two authors. And when you get to somebody like, for example, Jeffery Deaver, who I think he mentioned he's got about 50 novels out now. It's hard to kind of go through that history. Jeffery Deaver. So just for the context for listeners, Jeffery Deaver, he's an international #1 best-selling author. His novels have appeared on bestseller lists around the world. I think Isabella mentioned that he sold somewhere around 50 million copies to this point. So a big name. And of course, Isabella is no small fry herself. She's a Wall Street Journal best-selling author. She's had a couple real strong breakout hits. I think one of them is going to be a movie with J-Lo. She is so they have both been very successful and have storied careers in their own rights. So I was curious to really question them about just the idea of co-authoring. Like, clearly you're doing this not out of a business need, but out of just you like each other, you get along, you write very similar styles, and you wanted to see what it was like. And having just co-authored my first book, and that's fresh in my memory, I was curious to see, like, well, how do you do it? What is your process? And we got down into some of the nitty gritty, even including talking about, working on the same document in OneDrive, and you can actually see the other person's cursor while you're in there as well. And sometimes even working on the exact same sentence at the exact same time. And that screws things up a little bit. So it was fascinating. They were good sports, and we had a great story. They are very outline specific people. They are plotters, but they both did fantastic and zero hesitation on our Making It Up story at the end. So you're going to love this one. This is my conversation with Jeffery Deaver and Isabella Maldonado. How are you? I got a chance to to share a table with you at Thriller Fest at the LRA party. I came in late, and
Oh, that's right.
I sat down, and we were chit-chatting for a little while.
That's that's right. That's right.
That
Yes,
was
of course.
chaotic.
Yeah. Oh,
That was
that was so much fun, wasn't it? Yeah.
It
they,
was. It was the highlight.
it's funny when you talk to other people who aren't writers and you tell them how important conferences and networking and everything is to writers, just as important as it is to anyone in any other industry. Everyone's always surprised by that, because they picture, you sit in your like shed in the backyard and you write your book, and then magical fairies come and
Uh,
take the book and you have
I'm,
nothing
I'm
to do
kind
with
of,
it.
I'm kind of hungry.
The cookie.
You don't mind if I have lunch, do you? 'Cause-
That's so cool.
Yeah, LRA made those amazing book cookies for their clients, and that was a showcase at that dinner.
and,
But
and
it might be a little stale by now, Jeffrey.
I'm kind of honorary because have extra different representation, but kind of also represented by Liza now with the joint project. And I mean, I felt like they just welcomed me into the family. It's been so
Yeah,
nice.
Yeah, they are very
exactly.
welcoming. So I don't know if you're familiar with the podcast, but it usually focuses on kind of the writer's journey, and it's very unscripted. But it's always different when I have two people on, co-writers on, to talk about their journeys. But Jeffrey, obviously, you have been well established for quite some time. But just out of curiosity, where did you grow up, Jeffrey?
I grew up in Chicago
Okay.
and lived there for about 25 years. Then I took a business trip to New York City and said, "Oh, I didn't get any sleep the first night I was there. I said I have to move here," and I did about a year later. Lived there for about 20 years, and then out to the countryside. I'm in North Carolina now, and in a speaking of fiction, I also live in Washington D.C., where everybody makes stuff up. So,
That they do. And did you? I always want to know if there was that kind of that seminal moment in the writer's young life, and I've heard a lot of different stories over the years about I can name the teacher who gave me an A on the essay that inspired me to become a writer, or I was always a creative kid. A big one is I was an army brat. We moved around, so I didn't have any friends, so I had books.
oh, okay, well, cool.
But Jeffrey, for you, do you have that moment where you're like, I think this is maybe what I want to do with my life?
First of all, I have to say there was never a teacher who gave me an A. That was not on the agenda.
There
Oh
was
no,
no encouragement.
I was a nerd growing up. I mean, literally a nerd, like a nerd when it meant something. Now if you're a nerd, you've got a stock options in some social
Right.
networking site. But I was a nerd, like a Leave It to Beaver nerd, and so I was drawn to books, kind of the same way, I guess. And I knew I wanted to write at 10, 10 or 11. I started writing then. It was all garbage, of course, but I just knew I wanted to write. And writers, there are no writer prodigies, like Jackson Pollock or Mozart. It takes a while to do that. And so I had other jobs until I could start writing fiction in my late 20s and early 30s. And then that's when I kind of made the transition from it having to be law to writing fiction.
And so was that your fiction writing, was that primarily self-taught? I mean, maybe reading some other books about writing, reading a lot of books in general, or did you have any kind of formal training
Oh, I
when you
took,
were?
yeah, I mean, I joke a little bit. I took creative writing. I'm sorry. I'm getting a lot of feedback. Are you picking that up?
I'm picking it up just a little bit, so I'm not sure if it's your mic or, but
I'm
it's
just
not
talking to
terrible
the
on the
computer. Oh, you know
recording, but
what? If we can, this is not live, I assume.
it is not live.
Um, what I'm going to do, yeah, that's me coming through, isn't it? Uh, I'm going to see if I can. I'm going to go into my Zoom. I may disappear for a moment.
Well, I have another very talented author here to talk
We can take our
to
time.
while you do that.
I may have two microphones going at once. That could be the problem. So,
Oh, okay. Yeah,
I would do it.
take your time.
That would do
So,
it.
so Isabella, we'll kind of pivot to you for a little bit. Did you have that moment as a kid?
It wasn't one single moment, but I always loved stories. I loved reading them. I always had a really active, overactive imagination. I like to tell stories, and I think that's I'm still that way today. Like, my husband and I joke about this, that I go to the grocery store and I come back and I have a story. And it's usually funny and it's usually embarrassing to me because self-deprecating humor is my favorite. And I find it, other people always enjoy that. It's usually something ridiculous that happened to me. And, but he'll go and he'll get groceries and he'll come back and I'm like, how did it go? And he's just like, what are you talking about? I got groceries. And I'm like, oh, he's not a natural storyteller. See, always something happens, the lady in line in front of me does something, or I see, or somebody's kid does something hilarious, and I have a story. And that's just, I think you're wired that way or you're not.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think it's a bit of a problem solving kind of thing too, where you think of a story and you start going down the path of like, okay, how does this actually work as a story? And even if it's a small anecdote from the grocery store, you do tend to think about like, all right, if I say it like this, it's going to land better. It's like a stand-up comedian in a way. Like I know where to pause. I know the emphasis to make, and when it doesn't work.
Yep. And you know how to put a hook like in the middle to make sure they keep listening. And then you know how to deliver the punch at the end. Jeff refers to it as a punch in the gut. That's his language that he calls it. But yes, that's the twist at the end.
Right. And again, it doesn't always land. And you're like, all right, that's good information. That's good data feedback for me. So now I know how to adjust it. Jeff, how are we doing with the mic?
Well, I'm gonna say something. It's still breaking up, isn't it?
A little bit.
Yeah, I'll tell you what the problem is. I have to go through one of the HD video cameras, and because my camera on my computer isn't working. Now, can you hear me now still?
Yeah, it's actually better. It seems better now.
Okay. Does that sound good?
It does.
Okay, I shut off one of the yeah, that sounds good to me. Okay. So and whatever Isabella said, yeah, I agree.
She was saying what a bear it is to work with you.
I knew that right away. I heard something about getting punched in the gut. I think that may have been. So
yeah, that is your expression. You refer to it when we're writing together. We have different language that we use. I call it a hook, like at the end of the chapter. But then sometimes the chapter will end, and Jeff will make a note, a punch in the gut, and that's that twist at the end, especially at the end of a chapter or a book or whatever, and that's what you look for. Yeah.
Well, we can talk about our philosophy and our approach, but we both feel that these books are propulsive. They're not. I don't want a book to be interesting. Neither does Isabella. We want it to be compelling. Like the TV show 24. That's kind of what we want it to be.
It's got to be in your face.
And every end of either a chapter or a section or a unit has to end on a springboard. You've got to force the reader through it, pick them up by the lapels and drag them screaming to the end of the book. And we're very manipulative, but people like to be manipulated,
But I think what people sometimes don't appreciate, some writers don't appreciate, is that springboard doesn't have to be, and then he was shot in the abdomen. It can be a thought, it can be a menacing mood, something that makes you want to turn that page, but it doesn't always have to be this nonstop, some violence or something like that.
Just a question. Where are my car keys? I have to escape. Where are my car keys? My wife took them. Oh no! I mean, something like that. Really, it's just that puts this conflict in the mind of the reader and drives them forward.
And I found out over time, I write very short chapters, and that was never to be manipulative or purposeful. It's just how I write, and so the next chapter might start exactly at the same scene, but it just felt like a chapter ending because there was a question like, where are my car keys? I'm like, oh, that feels like, and then you realize like that actually works. That gets people like reading at night.
If you want to be particularly manipulative, don't start the next chapter that way. Go to something entirely different so that then the reader thinks, oh, hell, I've got to read through this and then end that chapter with a springboard that jumps into the chapter after that. Manipulative.
Right. Exactly. Well, I mean, what works. I mean, there's obviously a long career history for both of you where you've seen evidence of how it's worked. But I'm curious, Jeff, when I was going through your kind of book list, and maybe I missed it, but I didn't see that you had, and maybe you have co-authored before. Do you have much of a history of that?
No, in fact, the only thing I've co-authored was one with John Sanford. We did a short story together, and he had Lucas Davenport, and I had Lincoln Rhyme appearing together.
Oh, okay, fantastic. But then, you've written 40 books or whatever the number is. What was the inspiration? Like, you know what? I'm ready to co-write something.
Oh, well, Isabella, do you want to feel this? Because this is a fascinating story, and she tells it better than I do.
Well, we had become friends all the way back in 2017 at the Murder and Mayhem in Chicago conference. And we just really hit it off. I mean, we both had this bizarre sense of humor, and told, these kind of funny jokes, and then, and we just really sort of became friends, but nothing else was sort of in the offing. And then later in 2020, my book, The Cipher, came out, and I asked Jeff if he would blurb the book. And it turned out to be a really good move, because The Cipher really just took off. It exploded, and it became like a big kind of international hit. But Jeff got a chance to really read my writing, and he read through the whole novel. And then that sort of made a difference, because he realized that the two of us write very much alike. And it was funny, because I even had some of my readers have commented, oh, your writing reminds me of Jeff Deaver, kind of thing. And but once we knew that, and we have other things, we both write in multiple POV, third person, past tense, close. So I mean, he could really see that. I had already read some of his books, but him reading mine. So then when he came to Scottsdale at the Poisoned Pen, he was doing a signing there, and then we went out afterwards just to talk and everything. And then we really started talking about it, and at first Jeff said, yeah, I don't play well with others. I don't write with other people.
It's true.
But then I think he realized that our writing was so similar and it would really work. I've never written with anybody either, but somehow the two of us knew that it would work. And we were both just up for it. We were already friends, and we wrote very much alike. So it worked.
And one of the most important things is that the prelude to the book itself, to writing the book itself, we were in agreement on. Now, if you followed, looked at anything of me on YouTube or gone to any of the conferences, I outline extensively. And Isabella she outlines as well, maybe has not done traditionally quite as much as I have, but it worked out so that we would together, not one or the other, but together we would come up with an extensive outline. I think the one for the second book that we're working on right now is 60 pages long, something like that.
Wow.
So
probably something like that. And but that's been, we've hammered that out over the past few months. And then we can sit down and write, which is the way I've always written, and it's the way she's written. If she were a pure pantser, and your listeners presumably know the term pantser is in seat of the pants versus the planner, the plotter and planner, that would not have worked. And I've heard some co-authors say one does a chapter and hands it to the other person, never knowing where it's going to go. And I maybe it's worked out, maybe it's worked out quite well, but I can't work that way. And I guess, Isabella can't either. And so it just worked out well the way we came together to put together the project.
And when you first kind of told her, I typically don't work well with others, what was what was in your mind? Like, how do you define that? What does that mean?
Well, I basically the process of writing is, of course, is very personal. It's personal for everybody. But there are people who, for instance, are in writers groups, share chapters as they write them with perhaps their loved one, perhaps with a writers group, maybe a teacher or mentor. And no, I don't do that. It's I write the entire book myself. I submit a proposal, it's accepted by the publisher, and I go away and I write the book. That's it. Nobody sees a single word until it's then it's highly edited. But the difference is that Isabella and I are sort of alter egos of the same writer. And so, and we can talk about the process in a moment, how we go back and forth. But as far as the idea of, daily input from an editor, that would be it's a non-starter. It simply wouldn't work. And I have a partner, and I show her when the third or fourth or 10th draft is done, and she's very helpful. And sometimes if I do a lot of really technical stuff, I hire an outside, basically a line, or not even a line editor, a copy editor, to make sure I did a book a few years ago where I know nothing about math, but a clue was a calculus problem. And I don't know calculus. I think it's something to do with math and numbers. I don't know. It's funny marks and things like that. I don't know. So I basically stole it off the internet, changed a few things so I wouldn't be sued, and put it in the book, and then gave it to an editor. And she said, "No, you're just completely wrong." And she fixed it. So I do things like that. But that's, that's corrective kind of stuff.
Well, and then because it's a very vulnerable thing to show anything, in a critique group, for example, you might show a couple of chapters and the book is entirely different by the time you actually finish it. So it can be different, and everyone's got their own methodology. But now, as co-authoring, and this is fascinating to me because I just co-authored my first book. So I'm curious about the process with other people as well. So now, Isabella, you were seeing Jeff at his most vulnerable. He's sending you stuff that hasn't been edited 10 times necessarily.
Right.
What's that impact been? Have you looked at him like, oh my God, like this really needs to be edited? Or is it?
Oh,
No, what is really cool about it is, and I've said this to Jeff before. I mean, if he wanted to, he could be a total prima donna or a diva, and he's not. I mean, he has sold 50 million books all over the world, all kinds. I mean, the kind of success that he's had could make him that way, and he's not. That's the most amazing thing about it. Because at first, when we first started exchanging stuff, it was like, well, I'm just used to being very utilitarian. And if I see a problem, I'm going to do it. I'm going to deal with it, because that's my law enforcement background. It's like when there's a situation, you don't just wait for it to go to hell. I mean, you deal with it now, and there's no pride. It doesn't matter if you're a captain or if you're a private. If you see a problem, you better say something, and you better say it now and out loud. So that's kind of my, that's how I approach things. So there's no ego. And the great thing is Jeff has no ego in that sense. We both have the same philosophy of we do what we do in the service of the story. It's what will tell the story best. So we have, it's a no ego zone. And we both just freely and with reckless abandon just edit each other's stuff to the point that when it's done, we can't even remember who wrote what. And Jeff laughs about this, but one of the times he was complimenting me, he's like, "This is such a great line." And I said, "Yeah, well, you wrote it." But he had forgotten but it sounded like, either one of us could have, because again, we're sort of similar. But by the time we're done, tearing it apart and putting it back together, it really is very much a joint project.
Yeah.
Well, I say it's a book, well, any creative product, but I'm familiar with novels, of course. It's all about the reader. It's not about the author. The author should vanish, into thin air. I think it was Nathaniel Hawthorne said that a writer should dissolve into pure thought and let the idea go into the minds of the readers. And so you have no business having any ego. We were just set the stage right up front. No, edit it if something's wrong, doesn't work. And we're nice people. It's not like, well, this is crap. No, it's like, here's why I don't think this works. And I'd say, oh yeah, you're right. Or, here's what I'm trying to get at. Let's try to fix it. But the end result is what is best for the readers. They're paying money, and more importantly, spending time with our books, and it's got to be 100% for them.
Right. You approach it. I mean, if you approach writing as if you were the reader, I mean, that's how I kind of think about it. Like, what would I want to read, and what would I appreciate? And then it becomes easy to identify the things that sound great, but really don't serve the story. And it's curious because you approach this from a place of like, we just want to do this. It was not like, you both have well-established, successful careers. You don't need to co-author. It doesn't seem like that there's any, kind of business strategy that was a driving force behind this. It just sounds like you're like, this would kind of be a fun thing to try out because we seem to coalesce pretty well. And then that makes it, I think, probably the working relationship a little bit easier. But that's not to say there's not pitfalls. So I'm curious to know, like, what is that process and how do you share points of view, and what kind of arguments do you get into?
Well, let me compliment Isabella, if I may, as from a technical point. She knew how this worked. I did not. We both write in Word, Microsoft Word, and she has a OneDrive. That's the cloud. I have it too. I kind of back stuff up for emergency purposes in case the asteroid hits my house.
Right.
It would target my house only, but at least there'll be a copy up somewhere. But it turns out, and she can speak far more articulately than I can about this, but there's a way that we can both pull the document up and work on it at the same time. And even more important from my perspective, I can pull it out of OneDrive and work on it locally, even though it still is connected to OneDrive. And this may not be I may not be explaining it quite well, but I've used Word since WordPerfect went away. WordPerfect, 30 years ago. Great. Yep. Okay, great word processing program. But Word allows you to adjust the keys, the function keys, but also every key. And I've redefined, I don't know, probably 24 keys on the keyboard. I touch type, so I know exactly where things are going. And so I was able to take the document, write it locally, use those keyboard shortcuts, which means I can write much more quickly and much more efficiently. And at the same time, she could see what I was doing simultaneously. We could work on the document together, and maybe you could explain better how that works, Isabella, because we've done a whole book and a half now, but I'm still not exactly sure how you put it together.
It all just, as long as one of you has a OneDrive account, and then you just, you give a link with full permission to the other person.
Right.
So when he accesses it in, he's a full editor just like I am. Yeah. And it is fun because I can even see where his cursor is. It'll say, like his name and in the cursor. He can tell where I am in the document. And we have found that the only thing that messes up is if we are literally editing the exact same line, the same sentence, and it can go wonky and shut down. But other than that, it's fine. And we're in there, tooling around and doing what we need to do. And then other times most of the time we work separately, but sometimes we must work together.
Right. So you,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, so you develop this really extensive outline, and then there's a division of labor that must happen after that to say, like, you're going to write X, Y, and Z, and I'm going to write this other thing, and then we'll go in and edit together. Is it something like that?
Well, we have to, create the prose. That's the irritating part about this whole business. Shame you can't just sell an outline and readers pick it up and buy it. But then we would largely divide up the task, and we had two primary points of view: one a woman, one a man. And logically, Isabella took mostly those sections. I took mostly the male sections of our protagonists, and then we kind of split the other parties. Again, we write third person, so part of the fun of writing fiction is to step into the shoes of somebody else. I always enjoy doing that. And it was kind of like, well, I've got a feel for this. Can I take it? And or I just don't have a feel for it. Would you be happy to take that? And the next thing we know, we're kind of racing along, and the prose is getting 10,000 words, 30,000 words, 60,000 words, and then we kind of came near the end, and then we start the serious editing.
Yeah. I mean, it seems to me that the actual writing is probably, this is just a guess, is probably the easier part, because you have such a crazy extensive outline. And it seems like maybe the outline is where the collaboration really has to go into overdrive, and you really have to be on the same page, and there's a lot more maybe back and forth. Is that fair assumption?
Well, what I'll say is, Stephen King, I respect so much because although he has a mind that ranges, I can't even get into his imagination. But what I'm speaking of now, which of course is I worship, but apart from that, he can spend, I don't know how much time credibly and viscerally having someone walk into a room and sit down. I mean, and nothing happens. You just see that real sense of his observation of the characters. And for me, it's like, well, I won't say exactly what I say, but it's like, oh, shucks. I got to get him out of the car. I got to get him to walk inside. I don't want to do that. It's okay. And because you have to be creative about it, or write a violent scene. Oh my gosh, the worst thing in the world. So actually, for me, the outline is the easy part. Then there's the banging out the prose. I call it sweat labor, manual labor. Right. And then it gets done. And then when it's all together, then the fun part comes back in, and that's editing. But that's just me. And Isabella, you have, maybe a different perspective altogether.
No, I actually weirdly, I mean, it's the same for me. To me, the outline is fun. I can just be free. I can be wild. I can put anything in there, the kitchen sink. I can put it all in the outline, and then it's easy to just take it out. And the good news is I haven't spent, 20,000 words on something that I realize is going nowhere, and I have to delete all of that. Because even in the outline form, it's like you can suddenly see, you're like, you know what, this character is not going anywhere. And as a matter of fact, Jeff and I were just doing that on the, we're just have sort of finished the outline stage of book 2, and we're starting the writing. But early in the outline phase, we realized that there was a whole subplot that had to go. It just was not going anywhere. Thank goodness we hadn't already written that, because that would have been probably 30,000 words of subplot that we would then have to go and excise. It's painful at that point. Right. So, but not in the outline. So I have fun with the outline. I'm feeling freewheeling. This is like the pantsers say they do this in their first draft, because they're exploratory writers and they just go wild and write whatever, and they don't mind, deleting a lot, and that's fine. And then I am also like Jeff, where I feel like, the work comes in writing the prose. But as you mentioned, it's having a roadmap, like knowing what I want to say in this scene really helps. It really helps me write it. And then I actually do enjoy editing. Most writers will say they can't stand editing. I love it. My own editor, my developmental editor, has called it my superpower. She's like, your editing phase, the book goes to the next level every time. It's because I enjoy editing.
As it should. I mean, so I am a pantser. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. But I found out over the course of 10 books, that's what works for me. But I agree, like the editing is great, because I get as much work as it's going to be. I get so excited about it. I can't wait to make this book better, because I know there's so many things wrong with it. Because the hardest thing to do is just to get that first draft done. And that's what stops so many writers, is they're trying to be perfect. And I'm like, no, get the draft done. And then it all comes alive in the
end. If I can quote a fellow author of ours, Lee Child, who's a friend and a great writer, of course, he said this great thing: don't get it right, get it written.
That's exactly, because it's never going to be perfect. Like no one's novel is perfect, and it's a reflection of who you were at the time. Right. Then go back and do the best that you can within your abilities at that period of time in your life. And we all go back and look at old stuff and be like, I could have done so much better, but not at that time. I couldn't have, and that's okay.
Actually, some of us don't go back under any circumstances.
Yeah, I never look at my old stuff. Like it's sometimes you go back because you got to do a reading, and like they need 5 minutes, right? And so you read a passage, you choose a passage that ends up being 7 minutes. So you start cutting things out. You realize, why didn't I just cut it? Why didn't I write like this to begin with? It's so much.
Do you do a reading at the lectern with a pen and just got to edit?
Right? Like, this is terrible. What's this adverb doing in here? So when you're coming up with the plot itself, and knowing that you kind of, I don't want to say write the same things, but you're approaching it kind of from the same angle, probably. Were there differing opinions about maybe how much violence to have or how many plot twists to have? Was somebody like, yeah, we got to kill this guy now?
Oh,
Because our books are very similar, we didn't have any conflict in that area. It's kind of a fine tuning thing. I am a very twist oriented author. I've done it's about 50 novels at this point, about 100 short stories, and they all have a twist, at least one twist in them. And I can be a little too twisty. And Isabella and I have talked about this. And there were some instances where I had, in fact, in the book that will, Fatal Intrusion, that will be out this fall, or out pretty soon, actually. I woke up in the middle of the night. I was so excited about this one twist. And it's true, I would have to have kind of, if shoehorn is a verb, shoehorned in a bunch of stuff, and I was so excited about it. And then she was kind about it, but said, "Are we sure we need it?" And the answer is, hell no. I don't know what I was thinking of, but this stuff just comes to me, and I like the twist. Often less is more, and that's the fewer twists you have, the more impact they have. But we still have like 4 big twists in the book in Fatal Intrusion, and we've got, I think, probably 3 really solid ones in what we're working on now. But that we have to, you have to do that.
and this is an example of how we kind of rein each other in. So, I could see how much we were going to have to, we would have had to do a whole lot of groundwork to make that twist pay off, and, probably add another 10,000 words to the story and everything. And, I could see there was going to be a problem. Could we do it? Yes. Would it have served the story best? Probably not, but the good thing, I mean, Jeff is totally cool about it. And then he did the same thing to me. So I was writing this one scene. I was writing this one scene, and it was an interrogation scene. And so, I mean, I've actually done a lot of interrogations, and I'm familiar with kind of how the person being interrogated will act. And, but I was just playing it up. I mean, I was just really vamping it up, as far as it could go. And then, Jeff had to rein me in, and he's just like, you know what? He goes, that is a bridge too far. Okay. That's just too much. And I mean, somebody, I mean,
well, we've told this story several times, and yet, and the question has come up, well, what was that story? And it shall remain unnamed, only because it shall remain unnamed. So,
right.
Because it was a bridge too far. And he had to rein me back in. I mean, I was having too much fun. I'm laughing out loud, cackling like a mad person. I am having so much fun. But it's kind of like when Jeff said he woke up like his brain on fire, ready to write this cool twist. Sometimes it's really cool in your head, and then you go writing it out, and it just doesn't quite work the same way. And that's why you got to trust each other on that.
And
go ahead.
Well, when I teach a course in writing, a seminar in writing, and one of the most important rules I tell my students is what the overall heading is: give me a break. And there's a rule that I tell them to keep in mind, and it's called the give me a break rule. And they step into the shoes of the reader, and at any point, a reader saying, "Oh, give me a break," and it could be about too much violence, it could be about too many twists, it could be about what happens during interrogations. It could be a character getting up on a soapbox. It could be, like in my case, well, in our case, both our cases, we don't injure children, we don't injure animals, we stay away from sexual violence, because that's, these books should be fun. And if you have an issue, we don't get into politics. Authors are, relatively well-informed people. Please feel free to come up with your own podcast or write a blog post or something, but it doesn't belong in a book where your job is to give people fun time. And so, that's, if you break the give me a break rule, then, you've got to think pretty hard about it. And I keep that in the back of my mind with everything I do.
Isabella, in that very specific example you just gave, because when you're co-writing, you have a built-in developmental editor, that you normally don't have. So in that specific example, were you writing this book on your own? Do you think you would have gone back and recognized that scene needed to be taken out?
Yeah, I would have.
Yeah, probably not. Probably not.
Then it would have been my dev editor, Charlotte, bless her heart. Actually, she was my dev editor, and now she also is the dev editor for our joint books. So it's great because she's used to my crazy. And, so that means she's already ready to accept Jeff's. And the good news is she likes what we write. So it helps, but she's just as ruthless. I mean, she'll go in there and say, yeah, this working and, this kind of thing, and kind of hold us to account. So there's my dog in the background.
Very
Hello,
nice.
buddy.
So when you started out this venture, did you have an idea like, hey, let's do a 3-book series, or was it like, let's do a book and just see what happens?
Well, we knew it would be 2 books because of the way the deal was structured, and and then we'll see how it goes. My theory is that I grew up reading series characters. James Bond, Travis McGee, Philip Marlowe, Sam Spade, Agatha Christie, Sherlock Holmes, and so forth. And so I I'm a plot-driven author, but I like my characters. But again, it's a business. We create. I say we're no different from Procter and Gamble. They make toothpaste, we make books. Absolutely no difference. Different type of product, but it still is a product for the marketplace. And if there's a market there, we'll consider keeping going. And if there isn't, we'll retool.
And I assume you're both working also on your own individual projects while you're doing this.
Yes.
How's been that to juggle? It feels like a lot. From my perspective, it feels like a lot.
Yeah, I will say, I'll be the first to say it was more than I thought it would be. I somehow thought, that means I'll just be writing like a book and a half a year, but somehow it's more than what would be half of a book. It takes more time because, again, we are both, Jeff and I, another thing we have in common, we're kind of perfectionists, and we keep wanting to edit and make it better and better. And we're like working so hard to make this book, and to start the series too, because we know we're starting and introducing new characters. It really was very effective, but it was actually, and neither one of us has co-authored anything. So it was more than I thought it was going to be. So I had a book that just came out in March 26th of my own. And then my book with Jeff will come out September 1st. And then I have another book of my own coming out January 26th. It's a lot. So yeah.
Are you touring together?
We will do some touring. Yes. Yeah. And in fact, go to our respective websites. I'm jeffreydiever.com and
IsabellaMaldonado.com.
And there'll be a schedule up there. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. So,
well, we're gonna wrap up. Before we do, we're gonna do the storytelling portion of the show, and I have no idea if you got the proper heads up about this or not.
Frankly, no, but that's okay. I was a Wall Street lawyer. I made stuff up for a living then. I'm an author now. I make stuff up for a living now. So
perfect.
Fine.
Well, there's 2 reasons the show is called Making It Up. One is because it's fully unscripted. Secondly is because at the end, I pick a random book off my bookshelf. You pick a page. I pick a sentence. I read that sentence out loud, and that's the first sentence in maybe a 2 or 3 minute long short story that we alternate going back and forth. So it's improv at its finest. I think this is going to be around episode 150. So I've done this a lot of times, and it never gets easier. And it's usually a shit show.
Did I hear it never ever gets easier? Well, okay. Well, I just have to say, my agent will be on the phone in just a minute, and we're going to have to get this all worked out ahead of time. But no, go ahead.
So I've actually chosen 3 books pretty much at random. They're all from my signed copy area, but I'm going to ask you to choose one of these. So I've got Ambush by Barbara Nicholas, The Last Mrs. Parrish, Liv Constantine, and The Girl Who Died by Ragnar Jonasson. So
wonder what happened in the last one. Sorry,
they all died. So one of you choose one of those books.
I don't know. I know Liv. I mean, do we want to pick?
Yeah, I was going to say, let's do The Last Mrs. Parrish. I love Liv Constantine. I should say.
Them. Their book.
The sisters. Sure.
And their sequel just came out Tuesday.
I got a copy.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, it was nice that they sent that out. Yes. So Isabella, give me a number between 1 and 400.
I'm going to say 278.
Right, damn, I knew you'd pick that one. Hell.
That's right. Well, I figure by that time things will have been cooking along enough that we should be in some sort of
Does
You
it
know.
does the chapter start with "It was a dark and stormy night"?
So I'm just gonna pick a sentence from this page. I'm gonna read that sentence,
Okay.
and then I don't know what order we want to go in, but usually I read the sentence. The person gives me one or two sentences, then I do a couple sentences. But maybe I'll go me, Jeff, Isabella, then back to me.
And so just to understand, we incorporate that sentence. So that's the first line, or can we paraphrase it? Can it be
no, the first line is the sentence I'm going to read, and then you say what the next couple sentences would be in this whatever crazy story.
And we use that line verbatim, basically.
Exactly.
Okay,
but I'll read the line so you don't have to use it. So the line is simply this: a look of indecision crossed his face.
He could not decide whether to use the Glock 17 or the sharpened rapier that he had set aside under the bed.
And he couldn't decide whether he should use that on the head or maybe one of the limbs in order to really get the person to talk.
And just before he chose the gun, he reflected that it had been a long time since he had done anything with just his bare hands. How intimate that felt, and what a difference sometimes it could make to get somebody to say something.
It was then that he smelled the scent of raw gasoline and recalled that he'd seen the can outside the door. He walked to the door and tested the knob, but it didn't turn.
So then he turned back to his prisoner and said, well, I guess I won't be able to use the gasoline, but I think I'm going to be able to get you to talk. I'm going to give you one last chance to tell me what I want to know, or it's on.
And just before the prisoner answered, that acrid smell of gasoline turned into something even more familiar: smoke.
And he said, for God's sakes, man, I used mayonnaise in the chicken salad.
All right, we got to call it there. See, this is what we call a cliffhanger.
Yeah. And have we illustrated why we outline? I think we've won our case now.
But that was fun.
Yes. I can tell you're a pantser because only a pantser would come up with a scheme like that. That is very, very much.
You know, I just had dinner. My niece just graduated from middle school, and she's into theater, into middle school, but they still do. She just did 42nd Street. She's fantastic. And I said, have you ever improvised? And she said, oh, she loves it. She does it all the time. That is the last thing in the world I could possibly imagine doing. I mean, so I don't act anyway, but just, you're on stage in front of people and you have to come up with something. And no, that would not happen.
But look how well you just did it. You just rolled with that. Well,
thank you for the critics review, but
the stakes were low.
I'm waiting for the New York Times review to come in on that one.
Well, what a pleasure to talk to you both, and it was nice to meet you briefly in New York, and I think we shared a little bit of a dessert. But I'm very excited for the book to come out and to see just watch it take off. So if you're touring in Denver, then I will make sure to come by and see you all.
Well, we'll do that. Good talking to you.
So that's it. That is my conversation with Jeffery Deaver and Isabella Maldonado. Their new book, Fatal Intrusion, will be out on September 1st. And that was an awesome conversation. They were both very generous with their time and their commentary. They had no lack of good stories to tell. And speaking of, I think the story we created at the end was fantastic. As much as Jeff said, I'm not a pantser, kind of pants the hell out of that story. And I thought it sounded great. So everything went well, despite the fact that, as usual, I had no questions prepared for this interview, but they were fantastic. Please visit Jeff's website at jeffreydeaver.com. You can do the same with Isabella's at isabellamaldonado.com. And, certainly check out their new book, Fatal Intrusion, out September 1st. And while you're online, check out my website, carterwilson.com. You can check out my books, my appearances, my newsletter, and the Making It Up show as well. And then if you head on over to unboundwriter.com, You can look at my October 2024 writing retreat and see if that might be a good fit for you, my one-on-one coaching services, and my online classes. That's it for now, folks. Thanks so much, as always, for watching and or listening to this Making It Up episode. Another episode will be out just next week. In the meantime, take care.